So it's 1979, long time ago, I'm old. And my band, Vivabeat, is working on a song at Uncle Rehearsal Studios in Van Nuys. Suddenly, two close friends, my roommates, bust in with the velocity and determination of a champagne cork to announce that they found a castle for us to rent. A castle in North Hollywood on Whipple Street, right behind a 4-day tire store. Right. It's so perfect, they gushed, and cheap. We gave them a deposit already. You just have to trust us. I was skeptical, but then a part of me couldn't help but imagine a moat, a couple of turrets, a suit of armor or two. 2 days later, pulling into a nondescript carport in a generic residential valley block, I spotted no drawbridge. But I entered a gleaming restaurant-sized kitchen that emptied into a living room that could have been the lobby of the Overlook Hotel in The Shining. Seriously, maybe 40 by 30 feet in size, with fairy tale stained glass windows of castles and dragons. And there were like huge hand-painted beams spanning the ceiling, a massive stone fireplace on one side across from a giant bright front with secret little hiding sliding compartments. And the whole thing was crowned by a large balcony from the second floor bedroom. And I am gonna get to the rock and roll part of this story, but we're just not there yet. So the living room opened into a glass-enclosed solarium with a switch-on waterfall with painted snow-capped mountains and weird, tiny little deer. One flight down, there was a cozy beer cellar with folksy German dioramas. It was one of those magical fantasy houses with spires and curves that were sprinkled throughout Los Angeles when I was a kid. Some of you natives might know what I'm talking about. They were the kind that should be protected treasures, but instead are mowed down by greed. So I could wax on about this remarkable castle we rented, about how the actor Stacy Keach Jr. Owned it, about Syriacs, the fascist German art director who worked for the studios and built the place just down the block from Lon Chaney's haunted Dracula house. And how Amelia Earhart gave her last in-person speech from that aforementioned balcony. But this is a rock and roll show, and that was just the setting for an only in Hollywood rock and roll party my roommates and I threw in our castle. At the time, besides the band, I worked with my roommate Pam in publicity at Areola Records. We mainly handled disco artists like the 3 Degrees, Amy Stewart, and Taka Boom. But we also had Nina Hagen's Cool Dutch Boyfriend, Herman Brood, and most memorable for me, the dreamy new wave English band Japan, whose guitar player Rob Dean would end up playing in Vivabeat with us. We had hosted a few impromptu gatherings at Whipple, as we endearingly called it. But this one hatched because not only was Japan in town doing shows and press, but so were our friends in the Elvis Costello band. Although they were at absolute opposite ends of the rock and roll spectrum, it was too enticing not to invite both bands to a party. Elvis and the Attractions began their U.S. career a couple years earlier in 1977, when Jake Riviera, their charming, saber-witted manager and co-founder of Stiff Records, intermittently shared an apartment with my then roommate Jenny Shore. and me when we were in a band called Backstage Pass. Jake launched Steph in the States from our little apartment, insisting we answer our phone stiff. The Damned and other bands would crash at the apartment. Backstage Pass got to open for Elvis at his first shows at the Whiskey, definitely a highlight of our colorful career. At Whipple, my current roommates and I each mentioned the party to a few close friends, and then they told a few people, and you know how it goes from there, right? Word spread until literally hundreds of people, from rock stars to the Prince of Abu Dhabi, to Rodney's crowd, to USC film students streamed into the castle. Besides Japan and Elvis and the attractions, I spotted Keith Ralph from the Yardbirds, members of the Cars, Ultravox, the Rock Cats, Wall of Voodoo, Thin Lizzy, Reckless Eric, The Damned, David Johansen Band, and who knows who else hobnobbed through those parlors in the alcoves. Milling through my house trying to play hostess, I felt I had tumbled into a surreal rock and roll funhouse ride, but I knew I had to play it casual and let it just be. Like this was my normal. So shortly after the soiree started, I walked in on members of the Ultravox, snapping Polaroids of one saucy young woman posing with her pink tutu crinoline pulled over her head. Upstairs in the room with the balcony where Amelia Earhart spoke, I heard a burst of strange, cackling laughter, screeching and pounding footsteps. Going to check on it, to my surprise, I saw a slightly older man I learned was a USC professor by day and evidently a hardcore leather boy by night. Seemingly high on God knows what, with his dramatically silicone-enhanced member whipped out, the professor was chasing guests through the house. I recall a couple people actually trying to lob ice at his appendage. If you know of the band Japan, they were the epitome of sultry glam and magazine model beauty, cool, unshakable, masters of eyeliner perfection. There was something wonderful about seeing that veneer crack as they took in the once terrifying and hilarious moment. Their manager, Simon Bell, trying to shield them, but was himself captivated by the freakish protrusion. Cases of beer and bags of chips were quickly consumed. My roommates, bandmates, and I took turns running to the local convenience store until we literally emptied out their booze section. Checking out our beer cellar basement, I walked in on Phil Lynott of Thin Lizzy and a crowd of revelers posing for photos with our life-size stand-up of the Ramones. Peeking in my bedroom, I found one couple on my bed while another rifled through my stuff. Remarkably, nothing seemed to be gone at the time, but I still wonder if that was the night my vinyl Sex Pistols t-shirt disappeared from my world. Knowing the Elvis entourage was rolling up late, we tried to stash a few bottles of beer and some whiskey, but it was impossible. This crowd could sniff it out anywhere. By the time they arrived, panicked to find something to serve them, I saw a resourceful friend combine the remnants of multiple bottles of beer so they looked like fresh full ones and gleefully hand them to the band. Amazingly, no one even noticed. The next morning, we found a mysteriously out-of-place guy in a flannel shirt and old-school blue jeans sleeping on an oversized, cushy purple living room chair. Once he woke, he demanded coffee, profusely complimented us on the fabulous party, and gathering his things scurried out just as the Prince of Abu Dhabi rolled up in a red Ferrari with a bodyguard to search for the diamond ring his girlfriend lost the night before. Fast forwarding several months, I was at a pub in London, as I often was in those days, and overhearing a group of guys at the next table regale each other with tales of visiting Los Angeles. One began talking about a wild party at an old Hollywood castle with all these bands, the Cars, Elvis, Thin Lizzy, and so on, and of course, a strange leather boy. It hit me how real that night had been. I had kind of taken it in stride, and it was relegated to almost a dreamy part of my consciousness. Yet here I was, across the world, and it was still reverberating. I couldn't resist strolling over to tell him it was my roommates and my party. The guy was as shocked as I was by the coincidence, but clearly gratified to have these stories substantiated. We only had Whipple for another year or so and managed a few more parties. But then, like so many fairy tale LA estates, it was sold to a developer and mowed down. So another block of cookie-cutter condos could fill the property, taking with it not only the stained glass, the waterfall, the beer cellar, and the locus of this legend. I'm sure it also displaced dozens of ghosts of other only in Hollywood parties that played out there long before we showed up. Thank you.